Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Degning. And Colin, it's the Wednesday Bulletin. You will notice that Kevin Graham is absent today. Like a number of Rangers players, he has tested and it's not good. Therefore, I'm stepping in and sitting in for Kevin Graham. Loads to discuss today in the world of Celtic. Two massive games, the biggest week in Ange Postecoglou's Celtic career. Colin, how are you feeling about these upcoming games?
This is definitely the biggest test he's had so far, This is massive in terms of the momentum that we've built up over the last couple of weeks. 6 wins in a row, 24 goals scored, only 4 conceded. If we can keep this going and you make it 8 out of 8, then we are miles ahead of anybody's wildest predictions when Ange Postecoglou took over. So with that, you've got a couple of days left in the transfer window. This is massive. I'm very nervous, but I think that's a good thing, because last season you weren't nervous, you just knew what was going to happen. I'd rather be nervous.
The feeling of dread, yes.
Exactly. I'd rather be nervous at that. So that's a good sign that things are going the right way, I'd say.
You know, when Colin's on the show, Brian, because there's normally a siren, so we need to have a klaxon here because he's in Greenock. There's normally a siren going past his gaff. We will be talking about the Alkmaar game. We'll also be discussing the fact that we are 6 days away from the transfer window slamming shut. Ryan Christie has still been in the news. Will he stay or will he go? The Rangers game, we will be chatting about the derby at the weekend and everything that surrounds that game, from ticketing to COVID testing, to how you feel we will line up. And finally, we'll have a wee chat about the Scotland squad and a couple of the omissions, because I think it'll be interesting to have a wee discussion with Colin Watt about one or two of the Celtic players who didn't make the squad, Colin. But let's start with Alkmaar. It's tomorrow night and we're away from home. We have the advantage. Brian Degning, 2-0. I'm looking at the team against St Mirren. I'm looking at the first leg against Alkmaar as well. Couple of changes between the two. Rogic dropped out for Christie. Forrest completely dropped out the squad, and Edouard came in with Furuhashi going out wide left. How do you think we'll shape up tomorrow night?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think you just depend. I actually quite liked Edouard next to Kyogo. I thought it helped that dynamic a wee bit. I felt that in the first leg, when Kyogo left, everyone sort of dropped back. So he's going to be key. So he starts anyway. He's definitely in there. I don't know if Forrest was injured or whatever reason, or maybe precautionary. He was in the squad, but I would expect maybe a Abada, Forrest, Kyogo up front. I think Rogic coming back in. I get the feeling that's because they're the strongest team at the moment. But then again, if Christie comes in someone's place, you can't see everyone be disappointed. The reality is, I think we should have enough. That's no disrespect to Alkmaar, because I thought they were very good actually. Big, strong side, well organised, good in the ball, and like to press as well. So it's going to be a big challenge, obviously. But I don't know. I get the feeling that Postecoglou, the way he's setting out his team and the way he's sort of attack-minded and sort of definitive in his philosophy, I don't see him changing, and I don't know how affected they'll be by being away from home. That's something I'm really interested to see, is if his side travel well. Because I feel like they're going to dictate the play anyway, and I don't know how much the crowd will affect them or not. So that'll be an interesting aspect to see. I expect us to score over there. I think we always get goals in our team. And that would mean, if we score, we're obviously going to score 3 or more. So, yeah, I would want to go as far as to say I'm comfortable about it. I'm like Colin, I'm quite nervous, but I think we've got it in our locker.
Sorry, Paul, just on that, Brian, you're saying that your 3 up front tomorrow night would be Abada, Forrest and Kyogo?
Yeah. So
Eddie would drop out the team?
I would drop Eddie out the team now, yeah, just to say, I think their movement and their pressing stronger, and I think Eddie's better coming on a wee bit later to change the dynamic up depending on the game.
I think that might be a mistake in the fact that, and this is Wednesday, so we're allowed to not agree on things for anybody that tunes in normally. I just think that we're going to need that out ball on Thursday night. I think AZ will definitely come out, knowing that they've got to score at least 2 to take it to extra time. I think they'll come out and have a good go at us. And if the defence are under a lot of pressure, what you want to do is to be able to get that ball out. And I think Eddie's the one that can hold the ball up. He's definitely starting to come back into form. And then if you've got the likes of Abada and Kyogo playing off him, then he can play the ball into them. I still think he's got steps to go to get to the level of Edouard that we've seen in the past. But big nights like that is when you're hoping that he turns up and puts a performance in and holds it up. If you're playing that three up there, I just don't think the ball sticks.
You know, your point there about Edouard holding the ball up, absolutely. You know, the strength, the close control, all of that. He has that in abundance. But in terms of an out ball, I just think that when you've got the energy of Abada, and for me, Christie on the left and Kyogo through the middle, you've got three guys who are constantly available all over the pitch. And although Eddie is coming into something like the form we know he can produce, I don't think he chases the lost causes as much. I don't think he occupies the areas of the park left and right that you've seen from the likes of Kyogo when he's playing through the centre. So it will be an interesting selection, but I'm probably veering towards Colin having Kyogo through the middle with Christie on the left and Abada on the right. That's the way I would set up. I think that Edouard would be a tremendous tool to have on the bench for a game like tomorrow night.
Aye. You look at it, I think Kyogo's best position is definitely through the middle. I just saying, there's people coming into the comments saying you don't think Edouard can do this, you don't think Edouard can do that. I do think Edouard's coming back into a bit of form, and as you said, Paul, with the ball at Edouard's feet, he can hold players off. His problem at times is that he tries to do far too much with it. But I don't. He
has been guilty of that. Yeah, he's been guilty of that.
I don't think he'll get the time to do that.
If you look at any of that combination of front three, that's a really strong front three.
Oh, definitely.
And it's really effective. And when was the last time we were in a position where we said any combination of that three is probably enough to get the job done? So we're in a very good position. So irrespective of who starts, the reality is...
It's a good headache to have, Brian, isn't it?
Okay, and it's the first time we've had that headache for a long time.
Yeah.
So either way, it's still an exciting... so I don't really care who starts. Eddie Munster can start up front for me as long as we get a result, but I think having those different combinations, I think all of them would work.
That was a wee flashback, a wee throwback. Eddie Munster, that was the nickname of Brian McLaughlin, wasn't it? Back in the 1990s, wee Eddie, they called him. Eddie Munster. And then it begs the question, Tommy Rogic dropped out against St Mirren. This is the best start to a season Tom Rogic's had in a wee while, I would suggest, Colin, and I think that he's one of the players who came into that category that you and I spoke about pre-season. We spoke about a group of players possibly coming to the fore who, we had hitherto maybe written off due to their performances last season. Tommy Rogic was definitely in that category, and he has come to the fore under Ange Postecoglou. We've spoken about his conditioning, we've spoken about his influence on the game that we've not seen for a long time with Tom Rogic. Now, we dropped out against St Mirren. I think that's the kind of game where your squad management comes into it, and I think it's a good idea. I don't know what the situation was with Forrest at the weekend, and if it was precautionary or an injury, as Brian suggested there. But if, for example, we've dropped Rogic out for that game, and perhaps even in Forrest, and maybe at other times of the season, although with his captaincy it might not happen that often, McGregor, these are the guys that are going to benefit from it. Does he come back in for the European game, Colin? Tommy Rogic, is there a part for him to play?
I think the team that we saw on Saturday will probably be the team that plays on Thursday night. I think Rogic will be one that comes off the bench, and it's difficult because I always think to get the best out of Rogic, you've got to start him. But then Saturday he kind of proved that wrong when he came off and still had the impact to set up the goal for Turnbull. So he's definitely getting back into the sort of Rogic of old that we remember, the one that we kind of always thought if he gets back to that level it would be great to have him in the squad. His commitment to the team this year definitely can't be denied. The fact that I think he lost, was it £13 or something he lost in weight, and then
is that right?
And he was doing double sessions at Lennoxtown, and that's not just stuff that's out there, that's stuff that Postecoglou said, that And the fact that Postecoglou came out after the game on Saturday and said, I'm not one to put an arm round players, he just knows what is demanded of me because he's worked for me before.
Yeah.
So that's great to see. Rogic for me is going to be a massive part of our success this season. And as you say, that midfield, when's the last time we saw Callum McGregor getting taken off after 60 minutes? Callum McGregor's a 90-minute man every day of the week, and the fact that we're able to bring players on like that and actually keep it fresh, that is massive, because we're relying on the same sort of 14, 15 players at the minute to get us through. And if others can step up to that mark, it's going to make sure that we kind of avoid injuries, we avoid burning players out. It's great to see.
But there's been a comment, though, by Ange that I found very telling, and it was around the transfer, which we'll talk about, of Juranovic coming in and how he's going to complement and support Tony Ralston. And the comment that he said was, because I can't expect him to play 60 games a season. So I think that goes back on the point that Colin's just made there, Brian. The management of this squad is going to be far, far better. We were looking at a situation last season where Scott Brown was playing 3 games in a week, one of which was in the San Siro. It was just madness. How impressed have you been so far? And by the way, he's doing the defensive kind of management on a shoestring. How impressed have you been so far with his squad management?
I think it's absolutely excellent. I think it's the little things you're seeing. Like, I thought it was very clever how he passed the armband to Christie the other day. I thought that was quite telling. I thought that was quite clever. He seems to have fostered a togetherness in the squad. Very quickly, without being that sort of, as he said his own word, I'm not going to be giving out cuddles. He seems to demand things from them, but he seems to be enjoying it and want to play for him. He just seems to have that aura. In terms of the management games, there's been some discussion before about whether he adapts systems or styles or whatever, but what he has shown is he's clever enough during a game to switch tactics or switch players' positions or navigate a game. He doesn't just leave it and hope for the best. He's always thinking, he's always planning. He's talking to his players, they're talking to each other. He's just, I've said before, I expect a couple of black eyes, I expect a couple of sore faces this season. Know me personally, by the way, as a Celtic fan, just in case any fans get any ideas. I think that the way he's going about his business is so good. I'm so confident that even if there's a mistake, it will be corrected, it will be analysed and understand. And just going back to the Rogic point earlier, I think he'll start tomorrow because of the reasons Colin said about Edward. I think if you're up against it and you can get the ball to him, the way he can cushion it, control it, and take players out, I think it's essential. So if you don't have Edward as your out ball, I think Rogic, although he's not going to be pacey, I think he can hold it and bring players in. But again, it's such a good headache that we're even having this conversation, because it's for the first time in a long time, and I think that's part of what Ange's brought as well. Squad management and transfers in and understand when to rotate, when not to rotate.
Yeah.
There's on the huff about it. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 points there. What you're saying about Rogic, I remember we did a Celtic by Numbers special one weekend on what to expect from Ange Postecoglou. And one of the points that stuck out for me was those players in the final third whose defensive qualities weren't good enough. But I think that certain players, and I think Turnbull and Rogic are very similar here, you don't see them throwing themselves into tackles, but their defensive qualities is in their ball retention. You often see them 5-10 yards in their own half. That's where they pick the ball up. By the time they've released the ball, we're on the attack. So they've turned defence. The transition from defence to attack is not, in their cases, a big slide tackle and winning the ball that way. And they leave that to the other guys who are probably better at it than they are. They do it playing their style of football. And I just think that, sometimes that's overlooked because it is a form of defence, the ball retention. And they're brilliant. They are brilliant at that transition, in particular David Turnbull. How often have you seen him in his own half, right, facing his own goal? He does that wee pirouette. Next thing you know, he's facing the opposition's goal. And then, he's maybe making 20 or 30 yards progress and then the dink. And you see it so often, it's coming, but it's almost impossible to defend because it's happening so quickly. So, I've been so impressed with that. The big question also is around, there's been a lot of talk about the inverted fullbacks, Colin. We're going to be talking a wee bit later about the incoming right back, the Scotland squad announcement, and whether or not players like Ralston and Welsh might feel aggrieved as to their omissions from the squad. But interestingly enough, we spoke before the last game about Jasper Carlson, who's a left winger, and he's one of the kind of star players in the Alkmaar team. He was missing from the first leg. He returns tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And, he's going to be up against someone who, he's basically, for me, he's overcome every test that's been thrown his way this season in Anthony Ralston. Do you have any concerns about us facing a starman flying left winger tomorrow night?
I think when you look at that AZ Alkmaar team, first of all, it's got to be said that the Dutch FA, or the league, or the Eredivisie, actually allowed Alkmaar to cancel their game at the weekend so that they could focus on this. But what I was surprised is that PSV didn't cancel their game, and Feyenoord didn't cancel their game either. So I don't know what's going on over there, if it was a choice or what they were able to do, but they didn't play at the weekend, so they're coming into this with no further injuries, no further kind of suspensions or that. As you say, Carlson comes back in, but they've got guys like is it Cooper Miners? Is that how you pronounce his name in midfield?
The captain.
No, I think that's DeWitt that's the captain. Cooper Miners is the one that's been linked with Roma and with Manchester United and Arsenal. For that, in the first game, I thought we managed to keep him very quiet as well. For me, the biggest threat that came from that team last Thursday night was the right back Sugawara, who I'd highlighted before the game, but I actually thought he played left back, so I got that one wrong. But he played at right back, and I think certainly amongst our chat anyway, a lot of people were impressed with the way he played on Thursday night. So look, if Celtic play the way that they've been playing this season with the Ange ball, then the likes of Carlson and even the other forward that they had, the only one that was kind of causing us trouble, I don't think you have to worry so much about the defence. It'd be more about containing the ball, keeping the possession. We're sitting at something around 60% possession for most games this year. So if we go out and play the style that Ange wants to play, you'd expect Celtic to try and do that again. Where it's going to be dangerous is going to be on the break, and that's where the inverted fullbacks might be a problem. Right. Because they do come in towards the middle of the park. You saw both Ralston and Taylor in the sort of midfield position. Does it then leave Starfelt and Welsh a bit exposed? That's when you've got to look at who's going to be playing alongside them. Who can you get back to actually track the ball back? For me, I don't think Abada comes back a lot. I think he's got the pace in him, but I've not seen him come back into those defensive positions. If you're playing guys like Forrest and Christie, they do that. So it's all about playing to the style of your own football, but knowing that you're not going to have the ball 100% of the time. So we're not going to change the way we play. It's going to be a massive test for both Ralston and Taylor on Thursday night, but there's nothing that they've done this season that suggests to me that they wouldn't be at least up for the challenge. I'm not saying they'd be fully prepared for it, but they'd be at least up for it. I think they're both kind of riding high on confidence at the minute. So, look, the best form of defence is always attack. So we've got to go over there. As Brian says, you've got to go over and try and score. You even sound like Ange now, Colin. But just to confirm, it is Cooper Miners who's the captain of that club. Is it? I thought it was.
Yeah, he's a captain, and obviously he's been linked with some big moves away as well. I see it as a challenge, but so far I've not seen Ralston buckle under any of the challenges that he's faced this season. As I said, we will be talking a wee bit more about him later on. Here's one before we move on. The Europa League final this year is on the 18th of May, and it's in Seville. So do you think there's a wee omen there, Brian?
Yeah, I don't know about that as much. I'd love to believe that. One of the things we I think Colin touched on, and we've touched on in the past, we talk about sounding like Ange and some of the things he says. One of my favourite ever quotes is with Jock Stein, and it says the best form of defence, the best place to defend is in your opponent's penalty box. And I love that idea. Just attacking, containing, just forcing them to defend, forcing them to think about your game, not you thinking about theirs. So I'm hoping that'll be the case. I say, the worry is obviously when you've got your inverted fullbacks are going to get caught, but I think because they're squeezing in the midfield, the idea is they're going to stop the balls releasing. But of course, it doesn't always work out that way.
Okay, now we are asking a question: can Ange Postecoglou's Celtic knock AZ Alkmaar out of Europe? Brian, you think they can? Colin?
I think we should have enough. on the day. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the game go to extra time, just because there's no away goals rule anymore. But I think we should have enough to do so. Also, very nice of UEFA to give the final to Seville, considering the amount of times that they've won that competition. It's probably about time they got to play in their own back garden.
And Gerald McEwen agrees, yes, he thinks we can do it. It won't be easy though. No, we're in for a long night. We'll be covering it on a Celtic State of Mind. I noticed during the week, last week there, Brian was calling the Wednesday, the midweek Maestros, I think it was, but KGM are calling you the Wednesday Wallopers, so I don't know which one.
That's my name for us.
I don't know which
Brian's
one.
The Maestros, I'm the Wallopers.
is more appropriate. So there we go. Let's have a wee chat then about the transfer window. 6 days to go until that slam's closed. Let's have a wee look at what's happened so far. So we've brought 8 players in, and we're expecting Liam Scales to be the 9th player to come in terms of first team players. And I include Liam Shaw and Osaze Urugide in the first team player squad, because we have signed a couple of players and we've made it pretty clear in the press conferences that they were signed for the Colts team. All right. Shaw and Urugide were not signed for the Colts team, but they haven't really featured prominently. In fact, Urugide's not played for the first team yet in a competitive game. Abada has come in. I think he's one of the guys at the moment at the age of 19 that he's been overshadowed a wee bit by Kyogo for obvious reasons, but what a signing he has been and what a prospect he is. Furuhashi, we have dedicated entire podcasts to Kyogo, and I think we'll be doing that all season. Carl Starfelt, he looked a lot steadier against St Mirren. Again, you're going to get the detractors saying, yeah, but look at the level of opposition. Big test for Starfelt tomorrow night, and hopefully he comes through that with flying colours. Lot, I think, has basically been the exact fit that we needed at the back in goals. I mean, he's made a lot of changes, a lot of an impact that wasn't that obvious until you had someone like Barkas in goals. He's doing a lot of the basics right, Brian, but we weren't getting that last season. James McCarthy's come in. He hasn't really got going yet. And, of course, Juranovic has also entered the building this week. Where else do we need to strengthen, Colin? I asked Lawrence this question yesterday. Lawrence thinks that we're going to utilise the loan market to bolster areas of the park that we might not be able to offload players in. For example, the left-back area. Mm-hmm. It's going to be difficult to offload ball and goalie. Do we bring in a lone left back? Where do you think we're going to strengthen here?
I think Scales will be a left back when he comes in, and I think it'll be between Scales and Taylor for that left back position. And I think that'll be it. As much as we probably could be doing with a further left back, I think that'll be your left backs for the season. For me, I think we definitely need another centre back. At the minute, you've got your 2 first choice picks in Welsh and Starfelt. You've got Julian coming back into training over the next couple of weeks, and then what? Then there's a massive gap between the quality of those 3 and who else is going to step in to do it. You mentioned Osaze Urugide. Now, I've not really seen him play a lot since he joined for us. I don't know if he's actually played a lot since he joined for us, but the bits I have seen suggest that he's still got a bit to go to be considered the sort of 4th choice centre back. So we do need to go in there with at least 4 centre backs for this season. I mean, you take a look at what's happening across the city, and if we have something like that happening and you lose a centre-back or 2, it's a terrible position to be going into any sort of game with. So having at least a backup for each position is key. I'd love 2 backups for each position, but we're not going to get that in this window. I think we could potentially still be doing with someone on the left-hand side. I know there's been talk of Christian Lovric before. I don't think that would happen unless someone like Edward moved on and you got the money for him. But between that and probably a centre forward as well, I still think we need a centre forward. I was impressed with Ayeti's sort of cameo at the weekend, but he's been one that's been very hot and cold since he joined. If Eddie moves on, a centre forward's a must. It's a must because you can't really go into the season with just Kyogo and Ayeti up front.
No, you're right. Now, you mentioned Scales there, Colin. Do you think those in charge, and this is a concern Brian's brought up in the past, they'll be looking at bodies as much as anything else. They'll be looking at Bolingoli as a first-team player who cost a few million quid and is on a decent wage as being a left-back. So do you think when Scales comes in, he will be viewed as cover for centre-half also?
I can see that happening, but when you look at his performances for Shamrock this season, he's been playing that sort of left wing back in a 5-3-2 or 3-5-2. What the kind of formation we played last season?
Was there a formation last season?
We changed it so many times, but I look back at the first game against Rangers last year, and you'd be surprised how many players are actually still around from that. We'll maybe get to that when we cover the game. Looking at his performances for Shamrock, he's playing on the left-hand side. If that's where he's getting his best performances for now, then I would stick to him being the left back or the left wing back or whatever sort of position we're going to play there. If he does need to come in as cover for centre half, that's a good addition to have, but it shouldn't detract from the fact that he is the left back. We should then go and sign someone else at centre back. We shouldn't be relying on one person to cover two positions. We sort of did that with El Hamid and it didn't really work. As soon as Frimpong moved on, you were relying on El Hamid, and then he had his own injury problems and it left us an even bigger gap. We can't rely on one player to fill the two spots. We do have to sign one for each position. The fact that he can play both is just a bonus.
Yeah, I'm going back to Brian's point. They'll be looking at Taylor, Bolingoli. In fact, Taylor, Montgomery, Bolingoli. Right, you're well covered at left back. Is that a fear for you, Brian?
Yeah, I think still a worry. In terms of the defensive side, I think, we definitely need a centre half. My feeling is that we're looking at loan a centre half in. Again, for the same reasons we left back, we've got Julian coming back, Eton's still there, you've got Dane, you've got Urigide. And I think they'll probably say, well, we're not going to spend $5 million on another centre back when you've already got people coming back. So I think they'll loan. The left back one's really interesting for me. So I don't know enough about this boy's skills. I don't. So if I'm being disrespectful here, I completely apologise. But is he going to be? I feel as if you're saying a player just now, they need to be better than the player that's in the position.
Yeah.
Is he going to come and be better than Taylor? I've no idea. It doesn't seem to be tested at the same level. So it seems an unusual signing for me. And again, the guy might come in and be brilliant, and I'm happy to eat my words as always. I'm happy to be wrong if it means Celtic are successful. But I feel as if you're signing a player, he has to be better than what you've got. You're not in a position now to be signing projects at the moment. I've said this before. I think, at right back, the Croatian lad coming in, I think what you've got there is someone who's probably better than Ralston, but Ralston's playing his skin. So that's good competition, that's what you want. There's no point signing someone just to be back up. You've got to be better than what we've got, and then they can rotate. So I'm concerned about the Steels signing. I don't know if that seems like a Dermot Desmond signing, to be honest, more than anyone else. So that's a wee bit of a worry. Centre half, I think we'll get a loan. I think you might also see a loan for a kind of a winger/striker. Because again, the same issues I'm talking about. If you got Griffith, Ayeti, Edward and Furuhashi, I don't see them forking out for another striker, if I'm honest. They can pull Furuhashi wide.
Yeah.
But then you get the same issues Colin's talking about, one player covering two positions. And he's going to be so important to a team, you can't risk him getting bumped out. So no. I think you might see that get supplemented, but with someone that can do a similar sort of winger/striker.
What I was going to bring up was the fact that we're kind of focusing on the defence, and rightly so. I think up to this point, with the personnel that we started with and all the concerns that brought, and the fact that, of course, in the second leg against Midtjylland, we've got two youngsters. I say youngsters, Welsh, obviously far more experienced than Dane Murray. Playing at centre half wasn't ideal, almost got through, knocked out after extra time. But when you look at that situation, obviously that is the area of focus, but I also want to look at the potential outgoings and the headaches that's going to cause. So you lose Eddie, and as Colin says there, all you've got up front is Ayeti. Kyogo obviously can play centre forward, and you've got to mention the big white elephant in the room, and Lee Griffiths still in the building. So if you lose Edwards and it's late in the day, that's not enough to be running with up until January. Yeah. Same applies on the left-hand side. That Colin says he's got concerns on the left. So do I, because yes, Abada can play out there, Kyogo can play out there. Is it their best positions? I don't think it is. I think Abada's better on the right, and I think that Kyogo's better through the middle. Forrest can play on the left, but he's better on the right as well. Mm-hmm. So then all you've got is Mikey Johnson, who, since he broke into the first team, has never been injury-free throughout a whole campaign. So if you lose Christie, that's what you're faced with. And if it's a late departure by Christie or Edward, I think that's my biggest concern of the transfer window. So whilst I'm sitting here thinking, right, we bring in Liam Scales, cover it on the left-hand side and potentially in the centre-half position. We're still in the race for Georgios Giacomakis. I think I'm getting used to his name after Werder Bremen pulled out, or apparently have pulled out due to his personal demands.
They've signed another striker as well.
So there's just Werder Bremen.
Yeah, they signed a striker on a 3-3 contract, yeah.
So they're out. So it's up to us to go and make that deal happen. If you do, you would expect one or both of Edouard and Griffiths to go. It looks as though we're in control of that situation. If we were to lose somebody like Ryan Christie, though, I think that's a massive gaping hole on the left-hand side for Celtic squad. So I still have some concerns. Who do we get rid of? I mean, because we're talking there about, obviously, Edouard. We're almost half expecting that to happen, but we haven't seen much in the way of interest, concrete interest. Southampton apparently are not interested in taking Ryan Christie down there. But the three players I would love to see us offloading, and I don't know if we can do it on a permanent basis, but we should be working round the clock to try and make it happen, Colin, is Barkas, Bolingoli and Griffiths.
I'd say there's others there as well that I think would either need to go on loan or move permanently as well. Guys like Ewan Henderson, who still doesn't seem to come anywhere close to being part of this squad, which is I think it's a shame, because I think he's been someone that's came in and made fleeting appearances here and there, but he's never really had the chance at Celtic.
He was excellent against Lille, wasn't he, last season, Colin?
I remember
came on and played really well.
I remember the first game after Brendan Rodgers left and Neil Lennon took over at Tynecastle, and he played in that game as well, and he was outstanding in that game. He's shown glimpses of what he can do, but I think for the sake of his own career, he'd be as well following his brother's lead and going and trying to make a career of himself elsewhere. I don't disagree with the other three. I think if you're able to get the other three moved on, then that would be a good bit of business towards the end of the transfer window. And then you're talking about loan players, guys like, I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe Uragidi go out on loan. I could see that happening. There's probably two or three others that you're talking about in the team, because there's that age gap between players that are eligible to play for the B team and then players that can maybe play in the Colts if they stay in the, I think is it the SPFL Trust, or it used to be the what would that competition used to be? It used to be like the
Challenge
Cup and stuff like that. Challenge Cup. Yeah. And then making that jump up to the first team. And the more players you bring in, the less opportunities it gives to these guys as well. So I would be surprised if we don't see guys like probably Connell, O'Connor, Robertson. These guys probably go out on loan for at least 6 months and then reviewing the situation in January.
What about yourself, Brian? Do you share my fears there? You know, the Christie and Eddie dilemma. If someone wants to come in last couple of days of the transfer window and take one of these guys away, it's going to really leave us short. And although we'll look to be pursuing a striker, there's not really, I mean, Lovren, as Colin says previously, there's not a great deal out there that we've been connected to or linked to on the left-hand side.
No, it's to be fair, Ange had said before that there's a lot of people they're looking at, and they're looking at what you mentioned, so they could kind of come out of the blue that this deal's been done. My concern has always been that if it gets to this stage in the transfer window, as you say, we're exposed, because do we trust that? Because although this transfer window has been successful in terms of personnel, it's still been a bit of a disaster in terms of timing. It'll still be a long time to get deals done. Do we really trust that someone's going to be coming and replace Eddie if he goes today? Well, no, because it means they're going to need at least 10 days or whatever it is before they feed and train. So that's you until after the transfer window. So if we lose any of these players just now, you can't replace them, really, at this stage. And then the issue is, do you get a player of as good quality who's ready to step in? My feeling's always been that Eddie's going to stay for the year. I think that Celtic have played hardball, thought they were going to get more than they did, and have put people off. I think Eddie seems, rumours suggest he's content to wait and go on a free. He does look as if he's enjoying his football, actually. He's looked sprightlier, at least. And it looks like he's enjoying playing the intelligent players. So I think he's staying, and I think the same will be said for Christie. Because apparently he can go in January, can't he? I'm led to believe he can sign for someone just now and go in January. So You don't get a transfer bid in for him. I don't think if you're a club down south, I think they'll just wait and sign him. So I think the two of them will still be here come the end of the transfer window. But it's going to be really, really interesting, to say the least, if one or both go. In terms of the players out, you're right, Barkas should be off, Bolingoli, Griffiths should be off. I mean, guys like Ewan Henderson and stuff like that. What I'm wondering is, maybe Ange is saying, right, we've got my starting 11, my sort of steady 11 just now. Let's keep playing them until everything settles down, till I start working on other things, and then maybe consider rotating over the course of the next few months. So you may have some of these guys in mind that just haven't featured yet. But you've got to imagine these conversations are taking place. You've got to imagine he's saying, listen, lads, you're not going to play, or I don't see you playing much, or get some experience. There's got to be things going on. I find it very strange guys like Barkas and Bolingoli are still there, especially Bolingoli, because he's not featured at all under Ange. And I just think, surely his agent can get him a move. That's what agents do. That's their job, and they get a good turn at it. I know football agents, they get good money for transfers. There's no way they can't force a move through for someone. There's no way they can't find him a suitable club. So maybe he fancies Bolingoli. Maybe he's just not played them yet. Maybe he thinks he's going to take a bit of time, but he might be a player.
Maybe we need to get in touch with Colin, Kazim Richards' agent, and put him in touch with Barkas and Bolingoli, because he always finds him a club, doesn't he? Whoever the agent is.
Incredible agent he's got. Unbelievable.
Yeah. 2 questions for you then, guys, right? So, we know the undoubted talent of Edouard. We know what happened last season. And obviously that's kind of spilled into this season. And there's signs there that we might get performances out of him should he stay. What happens 2 or 3 days before the transfer window closes if a club comes in, Colin, with a bid of 10 million quid for Edouard? Do you take the fee and you're running short for the rest of the year up to January, or do you knock it back knowing that you're basically saying no to £10 million?
I'd say you knock it back. And I know the 40% kind of selling that you're talking about, that's only on the profit. So your profits say £1 million. So you're only paying PSG £400,000 of that. But the big prize is the £40 million that's on offer in terms of getting qualification for the Champions League next season.
Yeah.
If you turn down the £10 million now and go and win the £40 million, whatever it is that you get for the Champions League next year, that's a better deal for me anyway. You're getting someone who has got experience at playing in Europe, he's got experience playing in the league. He is certainly playing above the level that we saw the kind of end of last year. And in the 2-3 days that you've got to try and bring somebody in, I'd be surprised if we do. I honestly don't think the Giacomakis thing happens. I don't think we bring him in. I don't think his heart's set on playing for Celtic. I know he's had the conversation with Ange, but he's been spending all this time trying to work out a deal with Werder Bremen. So for me, I don't think he wants to come to Celtic. I think he sees Celtic as his backup option. And if that's the case, then do you want him to come over here and do you want to spend that sort of money on him?
Well, the question is then, looking at last season, and some of the issues last season that we faced, once bitten, twice shy, do you keep a player in Edouard who apparently wanted away last year? Do you keep him for another year? Because you're talking about bringing in a new player who might not want to be there. Giacomakis will go to whatever club meets his personal demands. Yeah. And that's the bottom line of it, But Edouard's already here, and if we get a bid of £10 million, do we look at the experience of last season, Colin, and say, well, apparently a massive part of the blame for the form of Edouard and others was the fact that they wanted away?
It was impressive, but when you think on it, that he wanted away and still managed to put in 20 goals last season. If he wants away again and puts in 20 goals this season, that could be worth £40 million to us.
So you would stick?
I would stick with him.
Yeah.
I would stick with him if the bid came in. Now, see, on the Giacomakis thing, he's 25, 26? He's had one very good season last year. I don't blame his agent for trying to hold out for the best amount of money, because he'll tie him down on a 3-4 year contract and pay him X amount a week, knowing that he's living off the back of that one season that he's had. If he goes and has a couple of good seasons, that's great for the team that signs him. If he goes and has a stinker, then he's got that contract that he can sit off for the next couple of years.
Would you rather buy a player on the top of his game or buy a player like a Yeti who had a stinker of a season at West Ham though? You've got to balance that up, you know.
Sure.
Brian, see when you're looking at it, because I can see a low bowler. I can see it. I mean, apparently there was a bid last season, but it didn't meet the expectations of the Celtic board in terms of the valuation of Edouard. If it does come in and it's as low as 10 million quid, do we take it, or do you do as Colin says and you keep him in, and an off-form Edouard has proved that an off-form Edouard can still score 20-odd goals in a season with a view to winning that league and getting into the Champions League?
If you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, I'd have said sell him. However, I think so close to the end of this transfer window, I just think it's folly to think we're going to get someone in really quickly. And I don't think we're in position now that transfers are dependent on his fee. I think any business that's going to be done, they've got the money to do it. I've always said with Edouard, and I'm in the minority, but he's never came out and said he wanted to go, particularly. Things suggested, apparently he said he wanted to go last year, apparently, but we don't know. The thing about the way I look at it is, see Celtic last year, now everybody that's watching just now, all of us, every Axon contributors worked for somebody they didn't like. You've also had a boss you couldn't stand, you've also had a bad working atmosphere, you've always worked somewhere where you went, I can't stand it here. I wish I'd gone. So it could be the case that last season it was such a toxic environment between Lennon being in charge, the dressing room falling out, people wanting to be there, then maybe that's why players want to leave. Look at the difference in Christie.
Yeah.
Look at the difference in him. Now, he's not signing a new contract. He might still see his career future elsewhere, but he's not unhappy. Edouard, I think, is gradually got a bit better. I think he's looking as if he's enjoying himself. And it's a better atmosphere, so he might flourish. And especially if he knows, do you know what, I'm here for the season, let's go into high. So I think it's too much of a gamble to sell anybody at this stage. The only people I would sell is the people I've mentioned, because I don't think they're going to feature anyway. And it's going to get some money and get them off the wage bill. So Griff I would get rid of, for obvious reasons. Ball and goal I don't think it's going to feature. And I don't think Barkas will feature again. So you can free up wages there and get some money in. But in terms of players that are likely to play, I wouldn't be replacing anybody just now. I think we can only add to the squad. And I just think at this stage of the season, with like less than a week left or whatever it is, it'd be madness for me to sell anybody at this stage that we think might feature.
I think when you look at it as well, has there actually been a bid for him? Is there interest there for him?
Well, Leicester apparently bidded and got knocked back because of the Brendan Rodgers tax.
But that was a way round about the Euros. There's been nothing since.
Brighton as well, and somebody else was the only wanted to they offered 13 and 15, the Celtic wanted 20.
So if there's not going to be an offer between now and the end of the window, then the simple thing is Edouard's going to be a Celtic player. You
run with it, yeah. You take the hit, and to be fair, it's not a bad hit if he does get your 20 goals, as Colin says. Some great points coming in. Francie WLU, the skinhead. Welcome back to the show, Francie. I reckon we can score early and increase the pressure. I mean, that would be the dream start, wouldn't it, really? Tomorrow night, you really would be confident at that stage. Joe Porter thinks another 2-0 for Celtic. And Lazarus reckons that we will score away from home. They'll need to score 4 or maybe 5 to knock us out at that stage. And a very good point coming in from Michelle Sharon. Good afternoon, fellow football fans. Just after yesterday's podcast, I got a text informing me that Danny Martin, long-time charge hand at Harati's Bar, had lost his battle with cancer. Rest in peace, Danny. Absolutely. Thoughts and prayers with Danny's friends and family. So thanks for bringing that up as well. Now, also, you've just mentioned Ryan Christie. Let's focus a wee bit on Ryan Christie, because he falls into that category that Colin and I were talking about, whereby we were basically saying, Brian, during the pre-season, you're going to be a clutch of players who come back to the fore. Almost, that cliche, they're like a new signing. And we've seen a few of them. We also thought there might be a few players from the young group that come to the fore. I don't know if you could class Ralston as young. 22 is young for me at my age, but I don't think we've seen much of that. The youngsters coming to the fore. Montgomery's in and about the team, which is tremendous. And then, of course, the signings. So Ryan Christie jumps into the category of a player who looked to be on his way out. His performances were definitely hampered last season. Colin, you were a big critic of Ryan Christie last season. You've been singing his praises this season, and quite rightly so. What's the biggest change you've noticed in his game this season?
It's an obvious one. He's not shooting every 2 seconds. It is interesting, but when you listen to his interview from back then, he was told if you get a sight of goal to take the shot. That was the instruction that was passed on to him last season. This season, his comments is that you look for the best ball. If the best opportunity is for you to shoot, then you take the shot. If it's to play somebody in, then you play them in. And I think you've seen a lot of that this season from Ryan Christie. Look, he's still not consistently in the team because there's players that are playing out their skins, like sort of Kyogo, Abada, and even in the midfield. But when he's coming in, he's an addition to that team. At times, I think a lot with Ryan Christie last season was that he didn't really know where he was going to play. He was kind of all over the park. He was chasing the ball about. He was giving away too many fouls when he's tracking back because it was kind of lazy tackles he was putting himself into. But I felt as if a lot of the time he felt like the team's responsibility was on his shoulders. He was the one that was meant to be the dictator. He was meant to be the playmaker in that team. And if Ryan Christie played well, then the team played well. I don't think it's that this season. I think he knows that there's quality players around him and he can rely on trying to find that pass. And if the opportunity is there, then he'll take the shot. But it's not going to be the first thing that comes into his mind. His first thing will be, is there anybody in a better position than me?
Yeah, I mean, the shooting was an issue last season until Turnbull come into the side, Brian, as was the corner kick situation. You know, I remember counting 15 corner kicks in a row over, I think, maybe 2 or 3 games, all taken by Ryan Christie, and not one of them met a target. You know, it was basically just losing possession as soon as we got a corner, rather than us piling the pressure on the opposing team. He did suffer. I think, the game plan was non-existent, as mentioned by Callum McGregor. How big a gesture was it, do you feel, Brian, handing him the captain's armband, so that it was almost as if, Forrest isn't here, he's the vice captain, but now we regard you as being in that kind of category as well. And we're in a precarious situation with Ryan Christie, Brian, with regards to his contract and, going away, and we're going to lose him for naught. Do you think we can keep him? Do you think we can get him on a new and improved contract with the effect of Ange being prevalent?
I think so. I think you sign a contract. Ange is proven himself incredibly cute in terms of how he goes about his business, even in terms of how he deals with the media. He's like, digs at the board, shoot people down that criticise. He's been very, very smart, very clever about how he's done things. And I think it was a very, very shrewd move to give him the captain's armband, because that was as much for our benefit as it was for his. Because I think that was a message to the fans that this isn't the Ryan Christie of last year. Listen, the club aren't stupid. Ryan Christie's not stupid, and Ange isn't stupid. They know he was criticised heavily last year, and rightly so, because his attitude was poor last year, as well as his shooting. I can't remember what game it was, but remember at one point, he had some crazy shot, crazy pass, and someone for the bench, I think it was Lennon, said something, and he turned around with this look of scorn, as if to say, "How dare you criticise me?" His attitude was poor. I don't like seeing that. He was probably right, but he still don't like to see it. So I think that was a message for the fans as much as it was for the player, as if to say, look, Christie's attitude's improved, I trust him, he's here. And I think that was incredibly clever for Ange.
It was.
Recently, in terms of his, I don't know if we're going to talk about it, but in terms of the Kyogo situation, his comments on that, he's put himself a very decent human being, a very smart, articulate man. And I think if you're a player, you're going to want to run through a wall for him. I watched that mic'd up session, that 3-minute gimmick Celtic put out, and I was wanting to run through a wall for him. I was wanting to do anything for him. So I can only imagine playing that day. And as I alluded to before, clever players like playing clever football with other clever players. The players he's got around him, Kyogo, Edward, Abada, Forrest, Turnbull, Kalmak, Logic. If you're playing in that midfield with that players, you're going to enjoy yourself. There's no doubt he's been given that attacking role, freedom to express himself. I think he must be loving things just now. And he may still see his future elsewhere, but I reckon he'll sign an 18-month extension, but probably still go in the summer, is my prediction.
I tell you what, see, when you look at that and you're speaking about running through brick walls for Ange, I think when you look at it, players don't just join Celtic because they're fans. They do it to develop their careers. Like say Juranovic is coming over from Legia to join Celtic. they don't do it because he's a mad Celtic fan or because the holy goalie told him to. He came over here to develop his career. Now, when you look at it, guys like Postecoglou, they're able to enhance the abilities of these players by putting proper training, proper coaching into them. And you even seen it so far with the likes of Edward. If he's happy playing with Ange, why wasn't he happy playing under Lennon? Is it because he didn't think that his development was getting to that stage? Was it being hindered? If you're able to attract players like that, then you can turn to Ryan Christie and say, here's another 12 months, stay for another 12 months. I mean, you look at that Celtic team, there's a few of them that are die-hard Celts, right? And that's always great to have in that team. But there's others that's going to be here for 3-4 years and then move on. But they want to move on a better player than what they are when they signed. And they're definitely going to do that under Postecoglou.
Well, a couple of points there. Brian, you're talking about the body language of Ryan Christie. Also, people were criticising him for not celebrating goals. I'm just amazed that we had a body language expert in the dugout last season and he never picked up on that, with Ryan Christie being unhappy. That I find that really bemusing. Also, here's another one, and I'm going to throw this to Colin. Giving that captain's armband may not have been a signal to the fans. What do you think if it was a signal to the board, Colin, to say that here's a guy who I regard as maybe third in line in terms of seniority in this team and influence in this team, and he is my vice captain, if you like, behind Jamesy Forrest, and I want him to get a new deal. I want him to be paid sufficiently alongside the likes of that ilk, because we know from the leaked document, which a second source has confirmed was accurate, that Ryan Christie's not one of the big earners at Celtic Park.
No, he's not.
Was that a sign to the board?
I'd say it is a sign. I'd say it's a sign of his importance to Ange. I think Ange has mentioned before, even in games, they say as well, if this isn't enough to convince him to sign a new contract, then I don't know what is. What I like about Ange as well, though, is the fact that he doesn't kind of press on these things. He doesn't say, oh, we'll speak to his agent and we'll do this and we'll do that. He always says his concentration's on the players and getting them ready for the next game, and he leaves it to the kind of the background team to deal with that. So that is tying in with what you're saying there, Paul, is the fact, oh, I want this guy for this season. Look how well we're playing. If we keep him, how much better can it get? I don't think he's kind of been naive to just give him the armband to say, well, you've been here long enough, so you're just going to get it. There's definitely some sort of, I'm trying to think, it's like a sort of a hint to people, this is what I need, and support me.
Well, the thing is, Luke comes in. Back in my day, a goat was something completely different, but I know it is now the greatest of all time. I wouldn't put it past Ange Postecoglou, Brian, that I'm going to make a wee statement here for the board, who are all going to be watching, as Ryan Christie is given the captain's armband because that's how important he is to this football club at this moment in time. Give him the deal. Get it over the line. You can't give every player everything that they want, but give him improved terms and keep him at the club. He's definitely smart enough to put that signal out there, isn't he, Ange?
100%, yeah. And I don't think he does anything by accident. I think he chooses his words very carefully, although he always looks like he's sort of not really that bothered about the questions, and he kind of just goes through them very casual way. But he's a clever man, and he knows exactly what he says and does. And as I say, I think that was a really clever gesture to the board and to the fans and to the player himself.
There's a game at the weekend as well. We've not really spoken too much about it. We're playing Rangers. It's at Ibrox. And two non-football matters seem to have dominated the headlines in relation to this fixture. First of all, we had the ticket issue whereby Rangers, having already agreed to give Celtic 750 tickets, which is a reduced allocation that they decided on a few years ago, they've now decided we're not getting any of those tickets, and the briefs are going to be left unused up at Celtic Park. The second element of this story is around the COVID, and there's a suggestion that a number of players have been struck down with that and may well miss the fixture. Now, Colin, you just said at the beginning of the show you were looking back on the 2-0 game at Celtic Park, which infamously was a match where we didn't have a shot on goal. And during that particular game, obviously, we were without four first teamers: Beaton, Elhamed, Christie, Edward. They all missed the game last season. That's flipped this time round. Seen a lot of people on social media saying I don't want them to have any excuses, I want to play a full strength Rangers. I'll tell you what, if they're 4 or 5 players short, if that happens, Colin, what do you see the Celtic side doing?
First of all, let's take a look back at that team that you mentioned. You mentioned the players that were out. This is the team that lined up that day. Barkas in goal, a back 5 of Frimpong, Ayer, Duffy, Welsh and Laxalt, a midfield 3 of Brown and Cham McGregor, and Klamala and Elyounoussi up front. 8 of those players have now left the team. 1 is now a bench, probably someone that might move on before the transfer window closes. So you've only got 2 players in that team that I would actually expect to see play on Sunday. That's how much of a transformation we've had in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Now, there's names being branded about, and I've not been able to see and confirm it on Sky, but some people are saying that there is. The likes of Rangers could be without 2 of the first goalkeepers. They could be without the first choice right winger. They could be without the first choice right back. That's the sort of same position that we were in on that game.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at it, we had 56% possession with that team. So we still managed to sort of dominate the ball as much as we didn't dominate the game. So you've got to look at it and say that even coming up against these guys, they're still going to have Aribo, they're still going to have Davis, they're still going to have Kamara, they're still going to have Morelos, they're still going to be a tricky challenge. They can't be underestimated. And for that reason, we've got to go out and give 100%. I mean, we should never go into a game against them and not give 100%, but it can't just be a case of, oh, well, they've got a couple of players out, it might make it easier. It doesn't. These games mean nothing when it's on paper. It's what's done on the park. So we do have to go into this game, give it absolutely 100%. And by the way, this is just an example of something that can happen to us this year as well. It's got to be kind of a sort of wake-up call to people that if anybody or any of the players were maybe not following the protocols 100%, this is something that can happen to us. And I hope they're 100% careful.
Well, as well as that, Colin, I hope we get a couple of extra bodies in just for any eventualities going forward. When we go into that fixture, I think Ange Postecoglou would always go in with his own game plan, Brian. How do you think the lack of Celtic fans will affect both sides? And what I mean by that is there's been a lot of talk around Rangers failing to perform in front of their own fans. Well, there's a stadium full of them at the weekend. We don't have any. It's basically backs to the wall for Celtic. But as the last couple of weeks has shown, whenever shots have been fired at Celtic, it's galvanised us. You look at the Kyogo scenario, it seems to have galvanised us. We've come together. So we're unified in that respect. Do you think the same thing's going to happen for Celtic? I remember the last game at Ibrox where the fans were shut out back in 94. That's off the top of my head, correct me if I'm wrong, 1994. And the Celtic team that day, which wasn't the strongest of Celtic sides, done extremely well and got a 1-1 draw. John Colin scoring the goal. Mikhailichenko equalising for Rangers. Going into that game, who does it affect the most, Brian?
I think it affects Rangers the most. And here's my rationale for that. If they go into that game, so say that they are weaker because of COVID, right? Or in fact, even if they're not, they go into that game with all their own fans there. They absolutely, unequivocally have to win. There's no doubt, there's no ifs, buts or maybes, there's no excuses. All the pressure is on them because they have to compete with the allegation that they can't perform in front of their own fans, right? They have to compete with the allegation that they're bottle merchants. They have to do that in front of a full house of their own fans. We imagine Celtic take the lead early. That crowd will turn on them in a second. And that pressure will make them crumble. If Celtic go there, don't get a result, or get a draw, or something like that, no result we want, then, we're a team in rebuild, it's new in the season, none of our own fans were there. The pressure's all on Rangers. I think they've shot themselves in the foot by doing this, because doing this tick allocation makes them look petty, and I think it's going to backfire spectacularly. The way we are playing, the one thing we're going to do is going to score goals against anybody. We might concede, we're going to score them. If we score first, I think they'll crumble, absolutely crumble.
What's your thoughts, Colin?
On the whole ticket allocation thing, as you say, it's very, very petty. I'd love to go back to the way it was a couple of years ago. when Celtic get the full broom loan and Rangers get whatever it is up to sort of the halfway. And I know I don't mean any offence to any season ticket holders that wouldn't get to the games because of that, but the atmosphere, I mean, I was brought up on that and it was brilliant. It does add to the occasion. It's Barry Ferguson even said that. When Barry Ferguson says he wants Celtic fans at Ibrox, then you know that there's something not quite right there.
Okay, to be fair, actually, with Barry Ferguson, I always feel that he's very respectful towards Celtic in interviews, certainly over the last few seasons. I have felt he's been pretty balanced, so I'm going to have to say that, and I'll get all the flack on social media afterwards. However, I agree with you, Colin. We need to get back to the situation where the fans and the rivalry within the stadium was part of the fixture, that atmosphere, that melting pot. And, there is a massive amount of hatred involved in that as well, which obviously spills into other areas and other discussion points that we may or may not have during the season. Big question as well for me is the referee and the officials have been announced. Is Kevin Clancy strong enough for this weekend's fixture? Colin, what?
I'll give him a benefit of the doubt until the whistle.
Okay. Brian?
I don't think any of the referees in Scotland are particularly competent. I don't know if it goes far as to say they're biased, but I think they put themselves in a position to appear biased because they're so bad at their job. So I don't really particularly have any great faith in any of the referees, if I'm honest.
And with regards to the fact that we will have one of our new additions available for selection, Colin, and obviously Tony Ralston's been having a good run of form. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow night, of course. I've always been reluctant to throw new players into a debut against Rangers. Would you try and stick to the familiarity of the side that we've seen over the last few weeks with, only making changes when necessary through injury?
I'm always one that says if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep.
Keep going. Keep going.
Tony Ralston starts against Rangers at Ibrox. Would you agree with that, Brian?
100%. Yeah, him and Welsh are the first names of the team sheet for me. I think he's been excellent, and I think he'll thrive on that. I think I really enjoy playing against him. So yeah, 100%.
Unless you guys are going to join me for the game tomorrow night, you won't be on Axon before the Rangers game. Therefore, I want a prediction. Starting with yourself, Colin. What?
Don't predict those games.
Sitting on the fence. Brian, I'm going to quickly come to you.
Colin, you're murder for that. You need to go off that fence, son. Every time you've got a prediction, you're still on it. I'm going to go 3-1.
3-1 Celtic. So we're looking at potentially a massive week in Ange Postecoglou's debut season. There is one more point of discussion, and I want to have it today, even though I'll be back on the Bulletin tomorrow. And the reason I want to have it is because Colin and I have crossed swords on a number of occasions over Tony Ralston. The Scotland squad, Colin, was announced, and we had suggested leading up to it. Welsh has had a good start to the season. Ralston has a good start to the season. Do you think they should be disappointed that they're not in that squad for the 3 upcoming fixtures?
I think they'll be disappointed, but I can see why they aren't part of the squad. When you look at it, you look at the options that's there. They're both guys that have played for the country before, starting at right back anyway. Patterson hasn't really kicked a ball for Rangers this season, so you could argue that he potentially shouldn't be part of that. When you look at O'Donnell's Steve Clarke's love child. He's going to be there no matter what. He could be 45 and he'd still be getting picked for Scotland as long as Steve Clarke's there, so that's on Steve Clarke. But as for Welsh is called up for the 21s. It'll be his first cap for the 21s. I don't know if that's a surprise to anybody. So, looking at the kind of logic that the coach is saying for the 21s, likes Calvin Ramsey and Taylor McKenzie at Aberdeen didn't get called up, but they get called up for the 19s because they're eligible to play for that. Scotland seem to think that you bring players up through the age groups until they get too old and then move them on. So I'm not surprised not to see Welsh in the Scotland team.
My kind of argument for that, and obviously Colin's bringing up love children, a wee bit of the old Diana Ross coming into the Axon Bulletin there, Brian. I would suggest, well, yeah, totally get that. They've been part of the squad, in and around the squad. But you've got to introduce players sometimes, and it can't always just be about friendlies. I think Declan Gallagher, for example, and Nathan Patterson already mentioned by Colin, they've only started one game each this season. And I think that when you look at that and, you know, hitting the ground running, yeah, you might have done really well for Scotland 3 months ago, and you might have been in and around the squad. But I would be far more likely, and this was a big criticism of Gordon Strachan when he was in charge of Scotland for me, not playing players who are on form. And I just think that, you know, that was my thinking with Welsh and with Ralston. I think Welsh, you know, maybe his introduction to international football starts now with the under-21s, and that's fair enough, and he can progress from there. I just think the time was now to bring in those two Celtic players. I think that's maybe an error on Clark. He does play it safe a lot of the time, Stevie Clark, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah.
He is incredibly risk-averse as a manager, so I think he would always go with tried and tested in his mind. So, first of all, I just want to say, I adore Scotland. I love my country. I love watching them play. I love when Celtic players play for them. But at the moment, if I had my way, I would have every Celtic player out of that squad and rested and developing under Ange just now. I'd have Calmac rested, Humble rested. So in this occasion, I know the players will be disappointed, but I'm glad Ralston and Welsh are going, because we need to rest the players, give them a bit of recovery time, and another few weeks training with Ange and get used to that system. So on this occasion, I would have none of the Celtic players in the squad. But yeah, realistically, both Welsh and Ralston should be disappointed, I think, not to be in there. Why Welsh should get under 21 cap, they should be staying in that squad. But as I say, on this occasion, I'm glad they're not.
Well, there we have it. Plenty to discuss as always. I was sitting in for Kevin Graham. Everybody involved in the comment section, thank you all for your ongoing support for the Celtic State of Mind. We have mentioned this week that we're up for 3 national awards as a result of all your support, so thank you very much for that. And the details of how to vote, how to get behind ACSOM, how to send us down to London, and hopefully we can bring 1, 2 or even 3 trophies back, Colin. All those details are all over the social media channels. I'll be putting a wee article on axom.net, the little used website that we have up and running as well for ACSOM. So thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to Colin Watt and Brian Degning for joining me again on A Celtic State of Mind.